we continue our program with a talk by Jukka Laakso. Clap, clap. Jukka, you have like more than 15 years of experience as a gaming executive, and recently you have been creating games beyond entertainment, focusing on treating major depressive disorder, and we're happy to hear about that.
Thank you, a pleasure to be here. So I'm here to talk about games, how they can be so much more than entertainment. In our case, especially, how a video game can help treating major depressive disorder, or depression, as commonly said, where conventional treatments fail. To start off with a few words about myself. So like the host said, I've been working in the games for about 15 years, run a 20+ people strong studio in Finland for almost 9 years, shipped multiple titles on multiple platforms, ranging from own IP to some of the most known IPs in the world. Yet, as we all know, gaming industry can be rough, so I had to shut down the studio in 2020. After that, I actually spent a few years at Aalto University in Helsinki as a creative producer on their neuroscience department. And there was this good friend of mine, Matthias, who was researching that can actually depression be treated using video games. I joined that. I managed a team of scientists, game developers, and researchers. The goal for that project was to build a product for a large-scale clinical trial in Finland, and then spin a company out of it if and when it works. Is at the end of the day, we want to help people, and you don't do that in an academic setting. You do it by building something big that people can access. And that was how Soihtu DTX was born. The DTX stands for Digital Therapeutics. As a company, we exist to help people living with mental health disorders to improve their mental health and quality of life by offering an evidence-based prescription digital therapeutic that uses video games as a medium. And the key word here being uses video games as a medium for delivering that mental health treatment. So I still get to develop games, but their focus is firstly on improving people's lives, and secondly, to entertain them. The idea what later became Soihtu actually started already in the early 90s by Matthias, one of our founders, who worked on system and cognitive neuroscience research with mental and neurological disorders. This research created insights into how neurocognitive training could be targeted to treat brain disorders. Since 2015, he has focused on depression solely. A giant leap was made in 2021 when all the founders for the company came together to develop that clinical trial version of the product. And finally, in November 24, Soihtu DTX was founded. Currently, we're developing the next version of the product towards market approval, so talking about FDA approval in the US and a CE mark here in Europe, so we can commercialize the treatment in the future. And of course, I'm not doing this alone. I have an awesome team around me. Our team consists of highly talented professionals, ranging from serial entrepreneurs to academic researchers. We are backed by venture capital and have a great set of advisors and partners. Interestingly, actually, since my background is in gaming, looking the team composition from that perspective, we have only about 40% are game developers in our team. The rest are basically scientists and regulatory people, since compared to a traditional game development, we operate in a highly regulated medical industry. So finding ways for agile development and fast iteration, what is known from game development, has been somewhat challenging from time to time. And like I said, overall, the goal is to become a prescription medicine, so something that the doctor will prescribe in the future as a medical treatment for depression. But yeah, going to the topic at hand. So the major question, how can we help the current mental health crisis with video games? And how efficient is it in treating depression symptoms, especially in our case? So first, let's look at depression a little bit. It's a huge problem. It's not going anywhere. It's a massive problem globally, and it's still growing. About 5% of adults suffer from it. It's one of the leading causes of disability, and burden, totaling to over 300 billion annually in the US alone. So it's a major problem. The problem under the hood actually is that depression itself is known for its mood symptoms and cognitive symptoms such as persistent low mood, rumination, thought distortions, and negative bias. Current treatments like antidepressants and cognitive behavior therapy, so psychotherapy, alleviate these mood symptoms. Roughly 50% of the patients have treatment response to antidepressants and about 40% to therapy. However, most of the depression patients suffer from neurocognitive impairments in attention, working memory, problem solving, and so on. These impairments in brain functioning these are impairments in the brain functioning and often persist even in the remission of the mood symptoms. Current treatments largely fail to treat these neurocognitive impairments. It is, in layman's terms, it is hard to perform well at work if you can't focus, remember, or solve any problems. Games, on the other hand, are a neurocognitive medium by default. The player uses their memory, attention, and problem solving constantly. Our approach is to use something called executive functions training to directly train these neurocognitive functions. The training aims to help both disability and the mood symptoms. Essentially, the brain is a muscle, and what we do, we train it in a form of a video game. And video games are actually the only way to do that. Yes, delivering an effective neurocognitive training requires adaptability and measurements in the millisecond scale. And for example, the conventional therapy has no possibility of improving the neurocognitive functioning. Additionally, we actually do deliver a cognitive behavior therapy as well in the next iteration of the product, which is fully tailored into the game narrative itself. I'll give an example about that later. But first, here's a short teaser about the Meliora that we used for the clinical trial. It ran on PC. It was done back at the university. And basically, we own all the exclusive rights to it. Mr. Sound. Perfect. So essentially, it was a first-person action game with some mixed RTS elements. Looking back, actually, one of the biggest challenges we had was finding a balance between the science and the gameplay. Designing something that works scientifically is rarely fun to play. So both sides had to do compromises. We bashed our heads together a lot with the science team to find out what makes it fun. Building something that is constantly measured and adapted sounds simple, but might easily become tedious for the player, especially since the whole cycle must happen precisely in the same way for hundreds of times. Once we had the product ready, it was time to test it in a clinical trial setting. And currently, we have one of the largest studies ever done in digital therapeutics. We had over 1,000 patients whom all had an ongoing treatment for depression, and 2/3 were female. Most of the patients had years of depression. They had over 80 different comorbidities, meaning that they suffered from mental health diseases like anxiety, ADHD, and so on. Generally, our patient population was categorized as a real-world, hard-to-treat patient population. So, did we have an effect on them with our intervention in the form of a video game? Oh boy, yes, we did. The clinical study itself met all its primary endpoints, being about 3 times better than the best possible treatment in Finland has to offer for depression. We saw the results that the training the neurocognitive impairments helped with the mood symptoms, thus reducing their depression symptom score. We also saw drastic reductions in anxiety and improved quality of life. So the patients were feeling the effects of the treatment in their everyday life. But given that the product itself wasn't PC, it was a first-person action game, and we had 2/3 female participants, I was a bit scared about the retention itself, or adherence, what is usually used in the medical terms. Yeah, I was scared for nothing. We had great retention, and more importantly, our patients used the product well over the guided 24 hours. They spent 46 hours in 8 weeks on average with the product. The daily usage time, or the daily game time, was limited to 90 minutes, so they had a lot of sessions throughout those 8 weeks. We saw from the data that a truly scalable, efficient treatment is driven by retention. Immersion leads to high engagement, which drives retention on the other hand. We even measured this, showing that the more immersed the patient was in the game itself, the higher the treatment effect. Sounds like a no-brainer for traditional mobile games, but instead of getting better LTVs, the patient gets better mentally. And as we all know, video games are capable of immersing players into their virtual worlds completely, which has always been their strength. We just harvested that for a medical setting. So, talking a little bit about where we're heading next with Soihtu and Meliora. The next version, Meliora Next, as the working title, allows the patients to interact with a tight, engaging, and immersive experience focused on delivering a digital intervention in a game-based format through an 8-week span and total usage time of 30 to 40 hours. So in layman's terms, it's still a video game. Front to end lasts about 40 hours, and the intervention, so the time of the length of the time you have to play it is about 8 weeks. It's something that is less action-driven, more approachable, and fits the audience better than the previous PC action game. Next, I'll show you a super early video of the product, which is captured directly from a playable demo running a mobile phone. So super rough stuff, but you get the idea.
Let's just stick with finding the self-repair routines.
Welcome to self-repair routine. That's those depressive glasses, filtering out the glimmers of hope you might otherwise see.
So breaking down the product itself, the user experience for a single session is roughly 15 to 20 minutes. The ideal amount will be twice a day, 6 days a week for 8 weeks. A single session consists of 2 different treating mechanisms and is delivered as a fully fledged video game. As you can see in the screenshot directly from the Unity editor itself, the therapy, CBT, and the neurocognitive training, EFT, are distributed throughout the level design. It will have traditional reward cycles to keep the patients engaged, and the adaptive algorithms constantly push the patient's precise and predefined performance bounds relative to each individual, whereas the therapeutic content is implemented from a pre-written script. In addition to those, it consists of traditional gameplay and narrative, all backed tightly to a single immersive experience. So like I said in the beginning, the brain is a muscle, something that we train. And these, especially the EFT tasks, are super demanding because they adapt to your skill level. So having that traditional gameplay between those is actually perfect for pacing. People who have ever gone to the gym, you can't constantly lift weights. You have to take those pauses. So the traditional gameplay is for that. And to give you an example on the therapy side itself, our main character in the game itself is actually tasked in the fictional game world to find out what is depression and how it can be treated. This in turn actually aligns perfectly with the patient's own agenda. And thus, we don't need to break the fourth wall too much when delivering the therapy content itself. Coming up with this actually took us a long time, since usually games breaking the fourth wall are sparse and non-existing when it comes to addressing serious medical content in a fictional setting. Once the product is ready, approved by the FDA in the US and has a CE mark in Europe, it will be delivered on iOS and Android platforms. It will be prescribed by doctors for patients suffering from depression. It will have the two treatment mechanisms as the core of the software as a medical device. These mechanisms are based on our own decades-long research and the clinical trial results, as well as the best practices of delivering therapeutic content for the patient. Yet, it will be a fun, immersive video game experience to the patient, who will enjoy it for those 8 weeks and get better. Finally, a few key takeaways that I've learned in the past 5 or 6 years. First, our core, the neurocognitive training, can only be achieved in a video game. Overall, we're talking about events being measured and happening in a millisecond scale, so no other medium is capable of creating the optimal and always similar circumstances for such an approach. This training can be applied to a lot of different mental health problems like ADHD, anxiety, or even post-COVID problems. Secondly, immersion is crucial. The treatment needs to look and feel like a game. It needs to be fun. When this is achieved, the efficacy of the treatment mechanisms will be exponentially boosted. Finally, everything within the product needs to align with the look and feel of the game in a way that they support each other. In our case, like I said, we struggled for a long time to find a way to break the fourth wall with therapy directed to the patient while still being immersed in the game world itself. The goal is that the patient should not realize the difference between the game and the treatment while using the product, still getting the medical benefit out of it. So I firmly believe that as an industry, we can help with the ongoing mental health crisis in a meaningful and effective way in the future, while still being entertaining and fun. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Jukka. So we still have time for questions from the audience. If there's anyone, just raise your hand. Here. Wait, just a sec. The colleague with the microphone is approaching. There he is. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation and the concept. I have a question about the gameplay, because this gameplay for people which are not involved in production looks like classical gameplay mechanism. And what is the difference between traditional game in gameplay material in comparison to your project, which make difference for the players and make treatment for them?
Yeah. Okay, so basically the difference is that a traditional game doesn't train anything. It might train you to kind of a minor degree, whereas what we do, we actually track like 90 different things that the player does, the patient does in the product, and we adapt those. So basically we find your precise level of brain functionality, for example, in working memory, and then we start squeezing that. We start to train it. And we train that for hours and hours without the patient even realizing that, because they're immersed in the game itself. And that's something that is non-existing in like normal games.
More questions for Jukka? Oh, right in the back.
Hi. My question, well, there we go. My question is kind of a follow-up question. I don't know what's going on with the recycling of the sound, but it's a follow-up question in regards to what are you... you say that you're testing on 90 different parameters, right? And that you're tweaking with that. And I was wondering, how do you know what you are targeting? Yeah. So how do you know what you're targeting? You use like 90 parameters, you say, and you have developed a model which you have included into the game and which you can adjust, which also means that you got to do a lot of questionnaires up front, right?
Yeah, so if I understood correctly, the question is how do we come up with the parameters that we're using in the adaptive algorithms and the medical engine itself? Yes. So basically, it's based on decades and decades of neuroscience. Matthias, one of our co-founders, he's a professor at the neuroscience department. So he's been studying this for a long time. And actually, the version we used for the clinical trials, it was already the 4th iteration of the product. So they've been fine-tuning those mechanisms for a long time. But this was the first time we made sure that they were fun to play as well.
Okay, I think there was another question from you. Okay, here in fourth row.
Hello. Mine is also a follow-up question. I was wondering what are some of the other parameters and how long does it take you in the first place when a player starts playing the game to assess their skills and then tune it to their special needs?
Yeah. So for the clinical trial version, I think it took a few hours. In the next version, it's going to take way less than that. We have a huge set of data, so we can actually use that data to build the model better and kind of figure out the level of skill for the patient much faster. So we're talking about like half an hour in the next version.
Okay, more questions? Okay, no. Then I'd say thank you, Jukka.
Thank you. Pleasure.